Former UFC champ, Sugar Rashad Evans joins us there. Rashad, thanks for the time, man. Really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem, man. Thank you.
We were actually talking last segment. We were talking a little bit. Leroy's was reminiscing about the old Tyson fights. How much of a great atmosphere that was. I saw you were hanging out with Tyson recently. You're now his tag team partner. Going out there. You're gonna take on a bunch of wrestlers with him.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if it goes down like that, yeah, I'm with Tyson's crew, his entourage. Tyson's been getting active lately, and part of him getting active and part of him wanting to fight is just him being out there. So we're gonna go out in LA in a few weeks and get some training in with him, but. Yeah, he wants to mix it up in all arenas.
Isn't Tyson his own entourage though? He don't seem like you just walk up on Tyson.
Nah, yeah, that's true. You don't walk up on Tyson. But here's the thing: Tyson is very deceptive because he's very humble and he's easy and he's very approachable. But at the same time, he has a fuse, you know what I'm saying? And he doesn't like to be handled too much. So then when he gets to the point where people are grabbing at him, then he gets ready to bite somebody.
Is it was he a guy you looked up to just as a young fight fan, Rashad? Like, is it weird being around Tyson at this point? Like, is it surreal or is it like, have you gotten time around him so now it's kind of normal, or is it always a little surreal being around Tyson?
I mean, when I think about it, like when I sit back and think, like, man, this is the guy who, I grew up watching on TV, and who my family would get around and watch his fights and all that kind of stuff. It is surreal, But like when when we have our quiet moments and we sit and we talk about, just about life and things like that on a deeper level, then it's like, oh, he's my friend, But it's still nevertheless, like, every once in a while I'm just like, dang, that's Mike Tyson,
So Rashad, when I was in Cleveland, he had a place there, and we would go to the same bar and we'd sit together for a couple of times every now and then. So he knew all the guys that would hang out there. And the one thing that took us all off guard, caught us all off guard, was how soft spoken he was. And we like, man, this guy is a violent dude. And he'd be like, hey, how you doing? Sit down. What y'all getting into? And you're like, whoa. I mean, it catches you off guard how soft-spoken and humble this dude is.
It really does, man. And then when he opens his mouth and he lets you know some of his life philosophy, then you feel like, wow, this dude has it figured out in areas where I haven't even thought about yet, And that's when the complexity of what Mike Tyson is really start, taking hold, because you see somebody who's a complete enigma. On one hand, he has this ability to be so destructive, but then on the other side, he has this eloquent, intellectual side that's able to dissect many, deep intellectual matters.
Before we get to UFC, one more thing on him. Like, do you talking to him? Does the comeback thing seem legit? Like, why does he want to come back, and what do you think that looks like for him if he does?
I think he does want to come back. I think for the most part, what it looks like is, maybe having a few exhibitions or something like that. But I don't know how serious of a level is going to be. I just know that he's just excited to be training again. And for Mike Tyson, if you follow him or you know him, you know that competing and trying to train is something that he struggled with, because he's worked so hard to get where he's at. On an egoic level, where he feels as if, like, when he starts to do things like fighting and he gets the attention and he gets the accolades, he doesn't want to do things to feed that ego, because he knows how intoxicating that is, and he knows the path that it took him down last time. So he was kind of weary about that. But being the fact that he's done so much therapy, cathartic therapy, with his, with the toad and with other, psilocybin psychedelics, it's been able to have him leapfrog as far as, just being able to mentally put himself with understanding that he'd be able to go back to competing without igniting all those egoic feelings,
This weekend, better knockout, Sean O'Malley or Cody Garbrandt? Which one did you like better?
Gosh.
Which one was better?
Oh my gosh,
They're both so sick.
They were both so sick, man. But I got to give it to Cody Garbrandt, man. You know why? Because that punch was for me, man. You know, I ended up my career losing, you know, and I wanted to have that moment where he did. You know, he was on a 3-fight losing streak, and at that point, you know, you become your own worst enemy because competing is psychological for the most part. And when you lose a psychological edge, that's the hardest thing to get back. So to see him come back after being knocked out 3 times in a row and to get a knockout in devastating fashion that he did, it made me almost well up inside, man.
What do you think is left for Amanda Nunes to do, man? I marvel at how damn good she is, and every time she goes out there, she just seems at like another clear level than the rest of the women she's taken on. If she, like at this point in her career, like would you think she just steps away and wait for something to come along? Do you just rest? Like when you're at this level of dominance, what do you think keeps that drive going for someone like that? Because it feels like all the challenges they throw at her, she's just taking care of it so easily.
Yeah, I think at this point with her, you know, since now that she's really competing in a league of her own in so many levels, I think right now I think she just has to compete against herself and just try to make it so that she makes a record so ridiculous and outstanding that no one would ever, you know, surpass what Amanda Nunes has done. You know, thus far she's already has taken a step with the champs and become the first to defend her belt at a championship weight class where she won the belt. So she's already kind of even separated herself from the greats. So now it's just, you know, she just keeps on growing. But I would love to see another fight and maybe a part 3 with her and Shevchenko again, because I think Shevchenko is growing tremendously as well. And I think that if they fight at maybe 135 or catch weight, that could be something to see.
Now, you've been one of the faces of the UFC before, Rashad. You've been to the absolute top of the sport. What are you making of the trend that's gone on the last couple of weeks? John Jones threatened to step away. Masvidal basically walking away from the championship fight with Usman and asking for his release, and Conor having his, you know, quote unquote retirement, although it seems more like posturing. What do you make of this? Do you think this is almost like an uprising of the stars that want to change something with the UFC, or do you think these are all kind of case by case, different, disgruntled, and that's a natural thing with fighting? What do you make of all that?
No, I think these guys are waking up, you know, and you have to understand like the different eras of fighting, you know. And when I was fighting in my era, we fought to prove that we were a sport. You know, I remember winning the Ultimate Fighter show, and you know, my mother-in-law, she says, "Okay, now you won. Are you going to get a real job?" And I didn't get upset because that was the thinking back then. You know, at the end of the day, you couldn't make a living off of being a fighter. So I understood the sentiment. But nowadays, these guys, you know, and when we fought just to fight on, you know, these, you know, to fight on the big stage and these platforms that these guys are fighting on, now that these guys are fighting on these platforms, they know what these platforms mean, and they know what, you know, athletes who compete on these platforms they get. And you know, these guys also understand, you know, the power and currency of their following, and social media has educated, you know, fighters so much on their own worth. And now there's algorithms that you can break down, and you can figure out your own worth, you know, based on, you know, your following or whatnot. So you can kind of come with some kind of calculation on what your value is to a specific card. So fighters are coming in there with more knowledge because, you know, people who are surrounding themselves around these fighters know there's money in the sport that's yet to be given out.
What do you, like, from your standpoint, do you think it's, I heard, I think Daniel Cormier say yesterday where he said, I think it's better to try and keep these things private because these, usually you have more progress if you just go directly and you don't air out the grievances. Do you think there is a benefit in making all this stuff private to get people behind you and let people know that you are upset, or is it better to just keep it behind closed doors?
Well, if you keep it behind closed doors, then, you know, then you may not have as much leverage in the situation when it comes down to having more support of others joining in on the fight. You know, if all these people would have maybe aired out their grievances in private, then when each of them confronted their grievance, they may have thought they had been the only one going through it. But now that there's more of them sounding off on the same sound, they all can understand the resonation and they all are kind of sounding off on the same pitch. So I think that, there is more strength in numbers, but here's the reality of the situation. It may just be bad time for it all. And by that I mean there's never a good time to form, there's never a good time for something like this, meaning the fact that, there's always going to be, we can, wait for this happen, and you can always put it off. But what I mean by this might not be the timing is economically speaking, we're being thrusted into a world where we don't really know what's going to be. We don't really know what's on the other side of everything that we're facing. And right now we're living day by day. And, we don't know what the travel restrictions are going to be and if they're going to let up or what is going to happen on an economic level. So the UFC has to be able to economically maneuver if there is such things that they have to make an adjustment for. So I can understand them holding back on wanting to give maybe some of the money that they were unexpectedly having to spend, because you got to also think about this, now that they're having to compete under these new guidelines, there's a whole new structure that has to come into place. There's a whole new financial burden that comes into place too, as far as with PPE equipment, as far as testing equipment, as far as making sure everybody's meeting the protocol, and all these different things that they now have to jump through, hoops they have to jump through, is coming with a financial price tag on it. So all these things are hitting their bottom line, which is hitting their fighters' bottom line. And I hear in a lot of different sports that, they may have to revisit the whole pay scale to kind of restructure things so then that way the sports can continue.
Rashad, I'm new to MMA. So Tobin started taking me to the little local cards probably 2 years ago, and I'm in it. And one of the things that I hate about it is I look forward to these fights, the top guys fighting, and they're not fighting. And I'm tired of watching these guys, fight the bottom tier of the rankings. I want to see these guys fight each other. What is it going to take for these guys to just go ahead on and fight? Because I don't want it to be all about money. I want to see the competition. I want to see them fight.
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing about it. Like, there's a few different things that can be holding up the fact of having these big blockbuster fights. Because we've seen some big fights, like we've seen, a title fight with Amanda Nunes and stuff like that. But I know what you're talking about when you're talking about these big blockbuster fights. You're talking about the Habibs, the Masvidals, the John Jones and Ngannous and those kind of big blockbusters. I think a big part of them holding off on really pushing those big blockbusters going forward is the fact that, live gate, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, it goes back to this whole situation we're pushed in on a world level. Do we forego the possibility of things opening up and putting a blockbuster on and having a live gate, or do we just say, let's have one of these big fights on and to see what we can do with just how things are? And then at the same time, you also have to understand some of the biggest fighters in the game with the biggest names like a McGregor and Habib, they can't come over to the United States because of the international flight restrictions. So this whole thing is kind of throwing a huge, convolution in the whole UFC plans. And, to their credit, they're doing their best to try to be the first one back and try to be the first one to get the fighters competing regularly. But at the same time, there's a lot of pains that they still need to go through. And it's difficult because, it's not – this has never been done before, and there's no blueprint to do this.
See, I feel better hearing that from you, okay? Because I understand it, and Tobin has told me, about the gate, and they're waiting, they want to get the whole pomp and circumstance of these big fights, the lead up, the gate, all these things that make a fight exciting. They want to wait before they put these fights, until these moments. Then why won't Dana just say that? Why does he come out as abrasive as the fighters are?
Yeah, I don't know. And maybe it may just be his own denial in the process. Maybe he's not willing to just say that, things may not go back to normal for another year or so, or make it so that, because it's scary to think about for the most part, from our point of view, when we hear things like we may not be able to return back to normal and do the things that we used to do for a year from now. That brings an unsteady feeling in your stomach. You know what I'm saying? So I do understand them not saying it, but it doesn't take away from the reality of what we're facing here. You know what I'm saying? Here we are, in the beginning of the summer, and it doesn't look as if like things are going to even open up until, fall. You know what I'm saying? So there's still a lot that has to be done with this whole thing on a world level, and trying to run a live sport event during this whole thing is tremendously difficult.
Before we get you out of here, Rashad, the fight we were looking forward to the most, obviously, the old South Florida crosstown rivalry, Kamaru versus Jorge, that's hit a negotiating snag. Now it looks like Gilbert Burns might slide in there. He's teammates with Kamaru. How weird is that the idea that he may have to fight for a title outside of the same gym? How does that work, I guess, gym politics wise? Is that going to be a difficult thing for them to navigate?
I'll be lying if I say it wasn't, because it always is. And it always is just based on the fact that whenever you're a fighter and you have to choose your camp, you pick people from your team. And you have to choose what you choose your teammates. And at that point, you decide and you see who's riding with you and who's not riding with you. And whoever's not riding with you, you remember that. And it's just something that stays with you. So then even after this whole fight thing is done and over with, that's something you never forget. You never forget who chose what side. And here's another weird thing about this whole thing is the fact that, before this all kind of happened, Kamaru was training was training at different gyms, and now he's kind of he's going to train in Denver. He's doing this training in Denver. So that may have been a disconnect too, as far as some of his teammates not feeling that team camaraderie around him. You know what I'm saying? So you
think it's a sign he may jump to another place to train train somewhere else if it does come down to that?
Well, I know for a fact he's training in Denver, but what I'm saying is his training in Denver may have been misconstrued as like he's not being part of the team and he's leaving the team, which could have caused a little bit of dissension amongst the ranks and being like, oh yeah, well, I got my role now. Now I want that title. You know what I'm saying? So there could be a little bit of that going on, but also at the same time, getting the title shot and earning it the way Gilbert did, coming from 155 and fighting all the way up through 170, and now getting his title shot. You can understand him wanting to take it. But my thing is this right here. Him and they've trained together for so long. Even in this past camp, Tyron Woodley camp, Kamaru sparred with Gilbert a couple rounds. So it's one of those things. It's no doubt a fight that is a hard fight on an emotional level, and it's going to be a hard fight for Kamaru on an emotional level because we all came up together. You know what I'm saying? We trained at 3 gyms together over the past 10 years, and we all helped each other grow. So it's a blessing, and at the same time, it's one of those. It's a sad thing too, as well too. But it shows that the team has done the work to earn themselves to the proper position.
Rashad, we always appreciate the time, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
No problem. Bye.
Sugar Rashad Evans, always great on the program. We'll be back with more after this.